on a Wednesday night on the Rock Pile. I want to make sure I thank the coaches for last week for doing the season finale of the College Football Rewind. I appreciate all the guys for coming on. We ended that week with over 2,000 views, and it was fun. The guys all predicted, I think Alabama to win, outside of my buddy Nick from C-Bus, who predicted the Buckeyes. But we get back to the business world, and tonight I have a special guest from the owner of Kingwater Chiropractic. Dave Kingwater is going to join me here in just a moment. I'm excited to talk to him about his business, and we'll get into a little powerlifting with Dave as well. Special month of February and March. Right now, both months are full. I'll be bringing the legends of Rome, a lot of Rome legends from coaching, all different fields, football, basketball, baseball, field hockey, you name it. I'm going to have a ton of coaches on for the month of February and March. I'm probably going to push it into April. So looking forward to catching up with a lot of the coaches. But without further ado, we finally got him on here. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we made it happen. So let me bring Dave on here with me. There's Dave. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Rocky. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm glad we were able to get it worked out.
That's always the most stressful part of my day lately is especially if I don't have my daughters around. It seems those are the only ones that can really get me the tech support that I need these days.
Well, we were talking the other night, and, one of the things that's been so big is, my place here at Bernie Bus, we were shut down in March, and then we came back a little bit. Everything has been remote. We've been doing a lot of these Zoom calls, go-to meetings, you name it, but it's really taken over during this pandemic.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. I've had to learn and step outside of my comfort zone for everything from continuing education to some consultations with patients. And it definitely puts an added stress when you're not used to doing that.
So Dave, talk to us a little bit about, Kingwater Chiropractic, who you are, what you specialize in, and so forth for us.
Well, the reason this is so special for me tonight, Rock, is just like you. This is where I was born and raised. I grew up. I went to school at Oriskany High School, and I knew that after going to school for physical therapy for a little bit, that I wanted to go to school for chiropractic. And I went to New York Chiropractic College in Seneca Falls, graduated in 2000. I practiced in East Greenbush for about a year, and I realized, that I wanted to be home. My home area is so important to me that to go through all that and not be able to help the people that I grew up, that I love, that I care for. So I came home in 2002, opened my own office in Marcy, and then gradually over the course of the next 5 to 6 years, transitioned from Marcy Family Chiropractic to Kingwater Chiropractic and opened an office in Whitesboro. And this is where I've been ever since, 2 miles away from the elementary school that I went to. And, it was the best decision I've ever made in my life.
Dave, I never thought in a million years when I graduated from college, I ended up in Columbus, Ohio for a little while. And, in high school, you're like, I can't wait to graduate and get away from home. And I never thought in a million years that I would come back. And I think one of the things that's really stood out to me, obviously, is family. But I think since I've started doing this show and I've learned so much about people and small businesses, the community support in this area, and I'll say the entire Mohawk Valley, is really special, right? It's home.
It is. My wife and I moved down to Alexandria, Virginia for a little bit, thinking like everybody else, if you want to make it big, you got to get out of the area. You got to, we were down just outside of Washington, D.C. Then we came and we went to Albany, constantly thinking that you have to be somewhere else to be somewhere else. And when I came back here, it was, to be experiencing other places, it gives you a little bit of a second look at our area. There is no greater people. I have got so much support from my friends from high school, from my family. I wouldn't be anywhere nearly as successful without this support structure that my home gave me.
And Dave, this COVID has impacted everybody and small businesses in general. And I'm obviously my industry with the school bus industry with kids at home and virtual. But talk to us about the COVID impact on your business.
It's really been unprecedented. Fortunately, over the years, when I first started, chiropractic was kind of considered secondary healthcare, where we weren't really treated with the same type of uh, the level of seriousness that most doctors are. But over the last 10 to 15 years, chiropractic has really grown into its, like a primary care form of healthcare. So we were considered essential, but the office was just basically, everybody was so scared to come out. Even though we were essential, it was really just the people that were in extreme pain that were coming out. So the office was, was kind of slow for a while, and then it slowly started to pick up as people understood the virus, understood how they can maneuver, how they have to go about their lives. But we've had to make a ton of changes in the office just to make sure that we're abiding by all the guidelines, that we're keeping our
Mhm.
staff safe, that we're keeping our patients safe. So it changes daily. But I've got a great staff, I've got a great patient base. We all work together, and we've survived.
Now, did you have to do any virtual, like, consultations or anything like that through this pandemic?
There were some times when I had to answer some questions over the phone, but unfortunately, with chiropractic being such a physical profession, and I don't prescribe any medications, so there's really very little other than maybe giving some icing recommendations or some stretching recommendations that I could do virtually. So we had to resort. I mean, I was here the full time. I was here in office taking care of patients. Again, by myself. Even my staff, for uh, for the safety of purpose, for the purpose of safety, is, it was just me in the office. And boy, you talk about going back in time. I was answering the phones, I was scheduling the patients, I was doing the computers. I screwed up more than you can possibly imagine. But but in that aspect, it was almost fun, because it brought me back to the roots of why I got into practice and how I started. When I started, I didn't have anybody.
How did you know you wanted to go into being a chiropractor?
Well, I was at Utica College. I was in the physical therapy program, but I knew I wanted to go on. I wanted to be a direct access, a portal of entry physician. I wanted to be somebody that, I could do my own thing. I didn't have to answer to other people. With that comes a lot of responsibility, and I knew that. But I had heard about chiropractic. And, it's kind of funny, Rock, that you would ask me that, because the reason that I became a chiropractor was I went to there was no chiropractors on our pre-professional advisory committee at Utica College. So I went to a local chiropractor who I'd heard a lot of good things about, and it was Dr. Herb Sip. So he brought me into his office, started talking to me a little bit, and I told him, I said, Doc, there's nobody that represents what I want to do. Would you be on the committee? He said, absolutely. But let me show you a little bit about what the profession's about. Took me in, did a workup, and adjusted me for the first time. And I knew right there, I knew exactly what I wanted to be. And everything from, the way he treated his patients to his sense of humor. And I knew right then. And unfortunately, just on Christmas Eve, we lost Dr. Sip. He passed away.
Mhm.
And it was just, it again made me think and go back all the reasons why I became a chiropractor. He was a great chiropractor, a great friend, and it always prides me to look back knowing that he was the reason that I got into it.
And Dave, the services, I was on your webpage and I was doing a lot of homework, and you talk about some of the services that you provide, and I saw the structural versus traditional. Can you talk to our listeners and viewers tonight the difference between the two?
Yeah, well, it's all what the practice focus is, and I tell every patient that I meet when they come into my office, the focus of my practice is structural correction. That I know two things: I know how the body is supposed to be built, and I know how it's supposed to move. When either of those two things go wrong, that's when you start to get pain. That's when you start to get dysfunction. So my primary job is looking at you like an inspector would look at a house. Maybe it's a new house, maybe it's a house that's weathered quite a few storms, but somebody's got to come in, inspect the foundation, inspect the walls. If you start to see some cracks here and there, how do we fix it? You don't want to just patch it up. You want to fix it, because if not, the same problem is going to keep coming back. So that was the aspect, and that was uh, that was something that I was very adamant about in the beginning. That I want to embrace solutions. I don't want to just be a cover up or a quick fix. And when you focus on structural correction, when you focus on fixing the posture, actually strengthening the body, you notice that you don't have the same problems that reoccur over and over and over.
And I guess when I think of, I got to admit, I've never been to a chiropractor yet, but from playing a sport, both my knees still hurt, both my shoulders still hurt. I'm 41. I feel like I'm going on about 61 from all the injuries that I've had. But when I think of it, I always just think, well, it's either your back or your neck, but there's more to it, right?
Well, you have to look at it from a holistic standpoint. Nothing operates in a vacuum. The muscles don't work by themselves. The spine doesn't work by themselves. We are humans. We work together. Everything works collectively. The bones, muscles, tendons, ligaments, nerves, discs, they all work collectively. And that's, again, one of the benefits of chiropractic, that when you affect the spine, you're affecting the nervous system, you're affecting the nerve flow. When you affect the spinal bones themselves and change the posture, you can relieve tension on muscles. And a big part of it is not only that you can reduce pain, but like you were talking about, all the aches and pains that you and I have had over the years.
Hmm.
Imagine if we did something about it back then. How much better would the quality of our lives be now, knowing what we know now? And
Sure.
not only that, but a lot of people don't come in for pain. The greatest part of my office is when people come in that just want to be a little bit better. They realize that, hey, after I got adjusted last time, I ran a little bit faster. I was out training for the Boilermaker. I knocked 2 minutes off my time. And then I get a chance to explain to them, like maybe a race car driver. I always use Jeff Gordon, but he's retired now, so
Hmm.
shows that I've been out of the loop a little bit. But they don't just park their cars in the trailer and just run them every Sunday. They're constantly fine tuning them, and they're fine tuning them because they want each fraction of a second. That performance means something. And that's what I want my patients to understand, not just for the fact that I've had a chance to work with UFC fighters, power lifters. When you're in pain, obviously that's going to affect your performance. But what if I could give you that extra little bit, that extra 5 pounds in the gym, that extra reaction time off of the starting line for a sprinter? That makes the difference. And for champions, that's everything.
And how about some different conditions though that you treat? Because I know you mentioned a few things. Obviously, you probably treat a lot of athletes, but even people that just have the everyday stress and maybe some people that like myself, I got to start eating better, what I put into my body. Talk to us about some of the different conditions that you do treat.
Without question, the number one condition that brings people into my office is low back pain. It's responsible for 85 million doctors visits a year.
Wow.
It's by far it's epidemic. But with that goes disc problems, goes sciatica, where the pain goes down your leg. But headaches, shoulder pains, neck pain and headaches, low back and sciatica, those two without a doubt the biggest issues. And most of the time, Rock, it's the it's the same thing that causes them. When you start to see the deterioration of your posture, there's logical explanations as to why you start to see those symptoms.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm just thinking what I would have loved, years ago, playing sports. What I know now, I wish I would have known years ago because I probably would have taken care of my body a lot better. But when you're younger, you're playing sports, right? You don't think of anything. You think you're untouchable. Do you treat a lot of athletes? Is that majority of your clientele? Is it athletes or is it kind of mix?
Believe it or not, the largest part is a family practice. I do have an athletic background. I take care of a lot of athletes, but the great thing is then the athletes realize the benefit, and guess what they do? They bring their kids in.
Right.
They send their mom and dad in. Once you get the idea of bettering yourself, and not just chiropractic, I'm talking about stretching, exercising, diet, nutrition. When you get that, it becomes contagious and it kind of spreads through your whole family. So the athlete is usually a point of contact for me, but then it just spreads. I do have a passion for the athletes because I can treat them a little bit different. I can yell at them a little bit more, or I don't yell at my normal patients. But when my power lifters or my fighters come in, and they're not listening to what I say, or they're not icing, um, there's a little bit of a different side of me that comes out with them, and I kind of like that.
Well, I think we'll always have that being a former athlete, and we'll get into some of the powerlifting stuff with you too. But I always say, being a former athlete myself, it kind of carries over to the business world, how I kind of manage and lead my people. And you're no different, right? In your field. I mean, that's carried over into your powerlifting and what you do now.
Absolutely. One of the things that it's a little bit of an ongoing joke at my house and the office, that I talk about my old sporting days. Powerlifting has been great to me, but the lessons that I learned from, playing, all I played was high school. I never played in
Yeah.
college, but those were some of my most cherished days. And the thing is, I still have my coaches. A lot of my coaches come into the office. Um, I know they wouldn't mind me violating confidentiality, but I won't. But that's a great part of it when they come in, and I still carry one of my jerseys in the back room. So every now and then, if I got to bust it out and show people, that I was a Joe Montana fan way back in high school. That's why I was number 16. So when they doubt why I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I can trace my lineage all the way back to my jersey in my back office.
I think nowadays, though, you'd probably be on the old line. You'd probably be a right tackle or a left tackle, right?
You know what? I was so skinny in high school, and I was about 160 pounds. Couldn't really do much of anything. And then I went away to college, and it was like something changed in my body. And my coach Bob Reed, when I came back from college, he said, "Where was this? You know, a couple of years ago." I literally just started growing overnight, and I guess everybody develops a little bit later, some or earlier.
Oriskany was always known for big linemen, though, weren't they?
We had, when I started playing, I guess everything seems a little bit bigger when you're younger, but I look back and it wasn't. I mean, we had a line that was kind of remnant. It was ironic that we were the Oriskany Redskins, and back in the day of the Washington Redskins, when they had
Mhm.
the Hogs,
Yep.
we had our own version of it. We had guys that were just mountains, and you don't see that in high school anymore. Not around here anyway. Not the
Yeah.
size of the guys that we had.
And again, I keep saying we'll get into the powerlifting thing, but you make an interesting point there because years ago when I was growing up, I went here to Rome Free Academy, and we had the base here, and we always had a great strength and conditioning coach, and Coach Tom Myslinski. But it seems like guys then were it's so much different nowadays. Even when you look at these college athletes to see now versus what they were 10, 15 years ago. And obviously the technology's changed, equipment has changed, but it's night and day different now, the bodies.
Oh, it's the in the sport of powerlifting, you can see it because the records of yesteryear are being destroyed, and being destroyed by hundreds of pounds by teenagers. Back in the day, there were certain numbers that were kind of the ceiling at that point, and it's just I'm constantly amazed by this new breed of athlete, not only on the football field but in the weight room and everything. It's just it's absolutely amazing to watch this happen. I know you had mentioned Coach Myslinski.
Mhm.
Um, I had followed his career and actually had a chance to talk to him a few times in powerlifting. He got hooked up with some guys from Columbus, Ohio, out at Westside Barbell, one of the most legendary powerlifting gyms, in the history of the sport. And he was well known out there, and I think he was with Cleveland as well, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yep.
So it was funny, after my football days, I kind of met up with him out in Columbus one day, bumped into him, and it was just kind of, hey, where are you from, and then when he told me his name, I knew exactly who he was. So
My uncle Paul 80, I don't know if you know Paul 80,
I
but
know him very, very well. He's a good friend of mine.
he said to say hi to you tonight too. He goes, "I'll be tuning in to see the animal on here tonight."
We Every time when I first started my office, I also had a small strength center, and I called up Paul because he had come to one of my powerlifting meets, and he's like, "Hey, you got to come over. I got some stuff for you." And they ended up there was Hamilton College had some stuff that they were selling through the Boosters Club, and got me stuff from when I was starting my powerlifting meets. All the weights came from those guys, and the bars. He just he loves the sport, loves athletics, but he was hardcore powerlifting too. I always loved talking to Paul.
So, Dave, how'd you get into powerlifting? Again, I know you played some football in high school. You said you didn't play in college, but where'd powerlifting come from with you?
When I moved out to Albany, starting before I finished my bachelor's, I got my associates in pre-physical therapy at Sage College. I started working out at a gym, and I went into a gym in Colony, and I was instantly attracted to this one area of the gym. The music was a little louder, the voices were a little louder, and like those linemen that we talked about, the dudes were just gigantic. And there was one fellow in particular, glad to still call him one of my really good friends, Hank Sargent. He was a multi-time national and world champion power lifter, and people were just scared to death to talk to him. And we struck up a friendship. I was just a young college kid, still on the skinny side, and he took me under his wing. And I was fortunate that gym turned out to be probably one of the more famous powerlifting gyms in New York. I couldn't have, of all the gym joints in all the world, I happened to stumble into that one. And I did my first powerlifting meet in February of 1995.
Wow.
And I've been competing ever since. The first time I did it, I knew that it was something where I could keep that fire going. I always talk about that with a lot of the people. My wife asked me a lot, how long you're going to compete for. I am going to compete until they put me in the ground. It's a reason for me to go to the gym. I probably wouldn't go to the gym if I didn't have a meet to train for. I'm not somebody who just loves to go to the gym. I'm competitive and competitive in my practice. I'm constantly assessing the logistics of my office, the same way with how I bench. At 48 years old, I still want to compete with the young guys. I still want to set records. So it's just one of those things where I constantly try to better myself. And when I competed in that first meet, I knew I wanted to go back to the gym, and I wanted to come back, and I wanted to do more, and I wanted to do more. And over the course of time, it's just I never thought that it would have led me to where led me today.
Well, you got some comments here, Mister Francis says, great football player for Oriskany. And
Well, since he opened the can of worms, that was I'm going to go ahead and just say it. Brian McQueen is probably one of my closest friends. He was one of my coaches in basketball, in football. And you know what, Rocky, when he comes into my office, when I see him around, I'm 48 years old. I'm a father of 3 girls. I run my own office. But when I see him, puts his hand up. He wants a high five. He high fives me and hugs me. And, for that moment, I'm a 16-year-old kid again. I'm getting
yeah,
ready for a game in the Carrier Dome. I'm getting ready for, a practice. And to do that, to be able to feel young, to be able to keep that spirit, I'll tell you, that's again, to come back to why I'm home. I'm home. I get to take care of all these people. I get to see them. And I just feel so fortunate to be able to do that.
yeah, he's great. He follows me all the time, and I appreciate him as well. Aaron Goodman says, "Big Dave." She put a little comment up on there, and let's see, we got a bunch on here. Nick Pasalacqua says, "What's up, Doc?" Hey, Nick, thanks for following us here tonight. Dave, I want to ask you this because I'm a dad. My son's 9, my daughter's 4, and this would have been my son's first year playing tackle football. And
Yeah.
years ago, if you would have told me, I would have been questioning whether or not to put my son in tackle football at 9 years old. Years ago, I would have said, I can't wait for my son to put the pads on. I've asked a lot of coaches, college coaches, professionals, you know, is it too young with the way the game is now, with the contact to a young person's body?
I don't believe so. I mean, and even if you look at any major organization, probably the number one authority on that would be the National Strength and Conditioning Association. When it comes to, I won't say impact training, but strength training, anything aggressive, we hear the same thing. We hear the same thing in powerlifting. Everybody looks at deadlifting and
Mhm.
says, oh, deadlifting is bad. You can't let your kids deadlift. The one thing that you, of all people, I mean, with your background in athletics and coaching and your family in coaching, that's the most important thing, Rocky, is
Yeah.
no matter what you do, if you have good quality coaches that teach you the right way to do things, Nothing is dangerous. You
Right.
know, I was watching the national championship the other night, and there was a questionable hit, a helmet to helmet hit, and I know it's sometimes in the heat of the game things happen, but when you got kids at a lower level, that's where that coaching, that's where that guidance comes in, where you as a coach, as a healthcare provider, when you give the right type of advice, that's what makes changes. That's what keeps people on the straight and narrow and makes things safe. You can't just run and hide from things, because
No.
then you can argue anything if you're not given the right instruction to do anything. My 16-year-old daughter Peyton is learning how to drive right now. I can't tell her it's not safe to drive just because she doesn't know what she's doing. I have to make sure I go out and take her and say, hey, that big red octagonal thing, that means stop. You can't just go through it. So, she'll argue with me, but I said stop means stop.
Well, speaking of the children too, I know you do some chiropractic work for children. What's the most common type of, I don't want to say injuries, but for younger people that come see you, what's the most common treatment for them?
Um, a lot of times the biggest thing that I deal with, I got to switch positions here a little bit. Wasn't anticipating being on my cell phone, but um, one of the more common conditions that we see with kids is scoliosis. A lot of times
Mhm.
the abnormal development of of the spine. Kids are growing uh, faster and stronger than ever before. And when you start to see the abnormal development, the little bit of the curvature of the spine, kids get headaches too. There's an old saying that I use in the office quite frequently with parents: "As the twig is bent, so grows the tree." A a child who has problems grows up to be an adult who has problems. So really, they're just smaller versions of us, right?
And you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the significance of, stretching, eating healthy, exercising. Talk to us a little bit about that because, what I always laugh about myself was I was a pretty good athlete. I wasn't as good as my sister, but I was pretty good. I wasn't the most flexible guy. I hated the stretch. I was the guy that would say, "Put on your shorts and t-shirt, put the sneaks on, let's get right to practice." But how important is the stretching, the eating, and the exercising?
Oh, it's crucial. How you prepare is, you want to minimize injury and optimize performance. This is what you have to do. You have to make sure the protocol, the principles of like rehab and prehab. These are all terminologies that athletic trainers are using now. That the days of like you and I used to do. We used to go out and maybe warmed up for 5 or 10 minutes. You really, when you start having the bodies and the dynamic contractions that these young athletes have, you have to prepare for it, and it's usually anywhere from a 15 to a 20-minute minimal, warm up, and that's going to prevent injury. That's going to get blood in the tendons, in the ligaments, in the muscles, in the surrounding joints, and it's going to drastically minimize the risk of injury. But the good thing is, that's not just about athletes, and this is where I like having that athletic mindset, bringing it to my patient base. That's the same thing, Rocky, that we have to do with my patients. I can't tell you how many people just get up in the morning and go to work, whatever they do. Maybe they run a jackhammer for a living, maybe they sit at a desk all day. They don't prepare for their day, and if you don't prepare, you're going to get in trouble. And the same thing at
Right.
nighttime. When you come home, we work, 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 and then we come home and just plop down and go to bed. We don't give our body a chance to unwind. We don't stretch. We don't ice, and then we wonder why we wake up in more pain the next day.
And Dave,
So
you had a significant injury yourself. Was it your shoulder?
it was my left forearm.
Okay.
But when I was benching at a qualifier for it was for the bench press nationals in 2003, and I was benching 600 pounds
Mm.
down in Cortland, and just in a freak accident, my left arm snapped.
Ooh.
And it was at the irony was, it was at the top of the lift. The lift was good. Like, when you're bench pressing, you complete the lift, and when it's at the top of the lift, the head referee says rack, which means the lift is done. It's good. And injuries never happen there. It's like a golf swing. Once you go all the way through your back swing and your forward swing, and when you're watching the ball, then something happening. It doesn't.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen. I had locked the weight out, and I got the rack command, and without warning, my left arm snapped.
Ugh.
And my spotters were clapping because I just broke an American record. So their hands weren't near the bar. And when my left arm snapped, the weight came right down on my neck.
Ugh.
Yeah. So it took me a lot. I had 3 surgeries. I have a lot of hardware in my arm. I had a couple infections after that. And it was just one of those things where I didn't think I would ever be able to get back into powerlifting. And a lot of different I became a coach myself. I started coaching people. I knew that I loved the sport of powerlifting so much that I still wanted to be involved, even though I was no longer, Dave Kingwater, the big bencher. I still love the sport. So I started working with a couple local lifters and was able to show them the sport and actually make them into national champions. I was able to coach 3 or 4 people in national championships. But how it happened, how it turned around for me was, Rocky, when you're coaching somebody, you can tell them, but sometimes you have to show them. And I was working out with uh, my good friend Tom Brown, who I run a powerlifting meet every year called the Tom Brown Memorial. Tom passed away almost 8 years ago. I run a memorial meet for him, but this is the best story ever. I was trying to tell the guys how to increase their technique. They were doing something wrong, and I said, "Guys, you're not getting it." I said, "Here, let me show you." Now, mind you, to this point, I couldn't. My arm was so weak, I couldn't even grab onto the bar.
Oof.
So I just laid down, and I told the guys, like, "So what you got to do is," I took the weight out. I said, "See how I'm bringing it down to my chest?" And I brought it back up and racked it. I'm still continuing my little lesson, and as I got up, everybody around me was looking. And Tom looked over at me. He's like, "How's your arm feel?" And I said, and I didn't even realize I had just
Wow.
benched 225. There was 2 plates on the bar, but it was so natural for me in that specific moment that I just laid down and did it. And it was kind of like I can't explain it. Everything just came back on that day. And so Tom said to me, he goes, "Why don't we test it out a little bit?" I said, Tom was a huge guy. Tom was about 6'5", 330 pounds. So
Wow.
I knew if anything was going to go wrong, he could probably just curl the weight off me. So we laid down, and he just kept stacking on the weight like the young kid in that movie Unbreakable. He just kept piling weight on, and I ended up benching 300 pounds that day.
Wow.
And from that point forward, it was just like, to me, it was, I don't know, it's like my dream just came back to life because I had a lot of aspirations in powerlifting. And then when I broke my arm, I just kind of accepted the fact, hey, I'm still here. I got a great chiropractic office, and you know that it is what it is. But when it came back, it just started just like a wildfire, man. It went out of control and started getting my strength back, and it led me to some pretty amazing places.
Dave, what's some of your personal best as far as your bench, deadlifts, and squats? What's some of your personal best?
Well, squatting and deadlifting, not really my forte, but I did all three when I was competing. My best ever squat was 575. Best ever deadlift was 567, and I was okay. I was competitive, but I knew that I was just better suited to bench. So probably I did probably about 20 25 full 3 lift meets, and then I started doing bench press contests. And my bench just was all my training partners pick on me. I outbench my squat. I outbench my deadlift.
Wow.
It's just the way things have worked out for me. But it was funny because I would go to the meets, I would get out squatted by 100 pounds, I would out bench them by 200 pounds, and just try to remain in the game at the end of the meet.
Wow. What's the most you've ever benched?
This past year, I did 720 pounds at the Arnold Classic.
Wow. Wow.
And that was when I talked about some of the places that I got to go, Rock, when they they did a story on me on the Sunday Sentinel a couple years back, when again talking about the same story, that when my dream kind of came back to life, I just rode the wave. I said, you know what, I'm having fun for the first time in a long time. I was having fun with the sport, and then I qualified for the Arnold Classic. And I don't know if you guys follow it at all, but that
Hmm.
is like That's like the Olympics. They host more athletes annually than the Olympics. So I qualified for the main stage for the bench press expo there, and to get there and to be what's important for me. I'm a lifetime drug-free athlete. I've never taken any performance enhancing, and I'm older. To get there, and powerlifting is kind of a young person's game. To be there at mid 40s, almost 50, and be competitive,
Hmm.
it's just and then on top of it, to have the first time I ever benched 700 pounds was at the Arnold in front of
Wow.
maybe 15,000 people. You walk out on the stage and it's just so awing. It's intimidating. But
You
to
know, you
have
you think of that injury though, because I'm just thinking back to, some of the college athletes that have had those gruesome injuries that you say, oh, there's no way they're going to play. Like you take Alex Smith, right, the quarterback for Washington that basically had 20 something leg surgeries, almost lost his leg, and you sit there and say, why the hell would this guy even chance coming back? Did you ever
yep,
have that moment where you said, am I nuts?
I Rocky, I still do. I still do, and it's hard to get it out of my mind because there's times my wife, she asks me all the time. My parents, I'm 48 years old. My parents still watch all my meets. My brother, um, and everybody always says the same thing. They're like, "Be careful." And I know what they mean when they say "be careful" because it's never long. It was a freak accident. There was nothing I did wrong the first time. It just
Yep.
happened, and who's to say that it wouldn't happen again? And then I go to a meet and I try to block it out as much as I can. But in our sport, the circles are relatively small. So when people see my name or I introduce myself, for the longest time, that's who I was. I was the guy who broke my arm. Hey, aren't you the guy who broke? Yeah, thanks for reminding me that. I just had blocked it out a little bit. But I embrace it because I think at this point I know I've mastered my technique. I'm as safe as I can be, and I think I run just as great of a risk of getting hurt in doing anything. Walking out of my house and slipping on the ice. I mean, it's just freak accidents are freak accidents. But yeah, like Alex Smith, I mean, I know exactly how the guy's got to feel. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing. Every step he takes, dropping back in the pocket,
Yeah.
is his leg going to buckle again? And but you know what? With maturity, I've been able to handle that. If this would have happened and I would have tried in my 20s and 30s, I would have been a basket case. There's no way. But I'm able to handle a little bit better and make progress and have fun with it.
Well, I told my sister I would bring a comment over of hers. She wrote you a long one here. She says you're one of the most inspirational people she knows. Definitely a beast on the bench. She says she's learned a ton in the world of powerlifting, and she says owes it all to you and my niece, her daughter Michaela. They loves coming to you.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I was just talking to Michaela tonight. She was doing a little bit of lifting, and that same mindset. You guys were brought up the same way. When you have that competitive mindset, it is just it's contagious. And the team that we got, I mean Shannon, the same way. I met your parents out at they came out to Columbus one time to
Yep.
to
Yep.
watch your sister lift, and it's just it never leaves you. You just find a way. If you played football, powerlifting is just such a great way to test yourself. And I have a great group of people around me. Your sister at 40 something, setting state records, setting national records, qualifying for the Arnold. I mean, what greater dream, when you can set that for your kids and kind of show them that, hey, the flame never goes out. And it's just, I think it's so important to I try to do that for my daughters, and seeing your sister, with Michaela. I mean, it's just it really is inspiring.
Well, I'll tell you, I always joke with her because she talks, obviously I told you she talks so highly of you, but when she first got into the power lift, and I'm sitting here saying, my sister's not very tall. She was a hell of a field hockey player. But I would have never in a million years thought my sister would be this much into powerlifting. But now I see from talking to you, just the passion in your voice about how it's such a community Now I can see why.
Well, it is, and just that the sense of, like, I guess a golfer, if you went out and you shot consistently and you took a couple strokes off your score, when you're competitive like that, it's just it keeps you going. Powerlifting is just it's a little bit more challenging because you start looking at your daily activity. Maybe you have a bad day in the office. You're a little bit under the weather, but now you've got to go and you've got to lift weights. You've got to do something that, number one, when you get older, you really don't want to do.
Hmm.
And most of the time it's intimidating, because anything else in life, like working with the fighters that I had a chance to work with, there's always an intimidation factor. You can always try to psych your opponent out, yelling and screaming and acting crazy. The weights don't care. So that's a reflection. You've actually got to try to psych yourself. So, some people listen to music. Some people, they have a different focus, a thought process. But you have to psych yourself up to do something that you really might not be able to do.
So
And
Dave, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, Dave.
no, that was, yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you here before I let you go is, I always ask this question with coaches, athletes, and the business owners. You mentioned a lot of people tonight that you've kind of looked up to over the years, but who have been some of those inspirational people, motivational, those role models for you?
Well, obviously, when it comes to my work ethic, my family, my mom and dad, they're always in the office. And I joke with everybody that at their age, my brother Chris and I say the same thing. We got to slow them down. They outwork me. They tire us out. And the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I mean, my family, a very hardworking family, loves the community, loves the area. My wife, I have a wonderful wife, my wife Kiara. I have three daughters, Peyton, Allie, and Danica. And that's what motivates me. I got a great staff in the office. So, I feel blessed on so many fronts, that I've got great people around me. But when it comes to chiropractic, I mean, I have a lot of friends in the profession, but Dr. Sip, again, who was just such an incredible role model for me in the profession. And powerlifting wise, I mean, all my friends are powerlifters. I mean, that's what we do. So, Tom Brown, the guy, my training partner for 8 or 9 years, it's like having when you have a training partner, it's like having another wife. You got to juggle the schedules. You get mad at each other if you're late, if you
Hmm.
cancel. So, something like that is very sacred. And I miss him a lot. And that's why the meet that I run means so much to me, that it's going to be, we rescheduled it. It was supposed to be in December. It's going to be March 27th, if everything goes according to schedule. We're sold out again. We got people, waiting to compete in this meet. But going back to just quickly, my friends from high school, the people that come into the office, that support the office, that saw me grow up, the biggest thrill I have in life is taking care of the people that took care of me.
Yep.
I have people that worked in the cafeteria at the elementary school. They come into my office. Brian McQueen, people like that who I've talked about. Um, it means so much to me to be a part of their lives. I'm glad that I came back to this area. The best decision I've ever made. I've got wonderful friends, a wonderful family, wonderful office. I mean, I don't know what else I could ask for. And my training partners, your sister, people. And then I got to bring them up. People like your father. I see him all the time. And that's just another great thing about the area. So, it means a lot.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate that. Well, listen, I'm so glad I was fortunate to finally get you on here, and hopefully, when this COVID thing goes away, maybe we can meet up and get out and have a few drinks. And your first class, and I want to thank you for being so good to my sister and my family as well. I really appreciate that.
Well, it means a lot to me to be on this. Everything that you do for the community, Rocky, with this show, and I know you just celebrated 5 years, was it, with
Yeah.
WKL? and just shows like this and reaching out to the businesses, it's a great thing, and I'm honored and happy to be on. And if I can ask you one thing, I know you were looking for some sponsors for the Legends month. I want to know if I can sponsor February 17th.
Is that my dad?
Yes, it is. That's
Is it?
Coach Corigliano.
You
That's
can. You can.
all
Yep.
right. Well, that's I
It'd be
remember
an
him
honor.
from back in the days. But yeah, that's so count me in for a sponsor on that. Thanks for having me on tonight. I really had a great time, and I look forward to meeting up with you.
Awesome. Sounds good, Dave. Appreciate it, my friend.
Have a great night.
You too. Well, that was awesome. I'm so glad I finally got a chance to connect with Dave. And it's so nice to see the passion still. I know we talked a lot about the powerlifting piece and his business, but when you hear him talk about the community and you hear him talk about some of the friends from high school that that he still keeps in touch with, and I appreciate him saying that about my dad. I didn't know that Dave was actually a player on one of the well, I shouldn't say one of the teams, but the game Oriskany and Westmoreland when my dad was the head coach. It was the championship game at the Dome. My dad told me this week that Dave was a member of that team. So, Dave, I appreciate it, my friend, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet up in person. But it was an honor to have you on here tonight. It's an honor to have all the guests on this show. And as Dave said, I just celebrated 5 years at WKL with the Mohawk Valley Sports Watch, and I want to make sure I give a shout out to my crew there. Pete Pagliaro, the Statman Eric Coleman were the ones that got started with me, and Coach Nick Medicis, part of that show as well, still going strong. And to all the people that have come on this show, I really appreciate it. I am really looking forward. Not that I don't look forward to every Wednesday night, but February and March, I'm probably going to have to go in April too. I have the legends. I have all the older coaches. And I say older, I mean coaches that I played for that are legends in this area from all sports, football, basketball, baseball, field hockey, you name it. They're going to be coming on with me through probably April. If you're looking at sponsoring a show, if you want to sponsor a whole month, just reach out to me. I always just take donations. I don't try to make money, but just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to set that up. Next week I'll post, but I'm going to be doing a show for the BeLive community. So I use a software called BeLive to do this show. I'm going to be doing a special show for them within their community next week that I will try to share with on YouTube and Facebook. I'm going to be doing with Shelly Hoffman. She is a colleague of mine on BeLive, but I will have it broadcasted right here live next Wednesday night. So, as I always say on this show every Wednesday night, the Rock Pile is where dreams become reality, everybody. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I appreciate it. Stay safe.